Hello and welcome to Sunday Artist Talk. My name is Lois Stone, abstract artist and owner of Stone Art Supply, and this is our third episode. Today we will be talking about the textile arts and specifically with quilt making. I am so happy to welcome two guests to the show today, Marsha Lorio and Donna Rockette. They are both quilt makers and they're going to tell us about their work, how they got started, what inspires them, and why they continue to do this process, this art practice. So let's begin with whoever wants to go first. How did you get started in quilt making? How did you get started? Who wants to go first?
I will. I actually got started by watching my grandmother and my mother and her sisters. In the church, they used to have these circles that they would sit and make utility quilts for people in the community. So it'd be like 10 people sitting around like sawhorses, the little plank with the four legs on it. That was their actual quilting, like a long arm quilting. And so I watched them as I grew and I grew, and I started sewing just a little bit. And naturally, I thought I will be able to do this, not knowing that it takes a little talent to do that. And so little by little, I came upon an article of G's Ben, and I read everything I could about them. I wanted to really pattern my patterns after them. So we actually went and visited them, and I was able to do like 10 stitches with them. So you couldn't tell me anything. Well, lo and behold, after retirement, I started with friends, just little by little. And that's how I got into uh, the quilting.
Right on. Okay, Donna.
Okay, so both my grandmothers always had quilts around, and I received quilts from the family on both sides. But I really got started in crafting and doing things is from my mother when we were probably I was probably about 5 or 6. You know, I started doing things. You started with some people remember the looms where you loop things over and you make the pot holder to get started off, and then on sewing. Early on, she made all our clothes, and so it was sewing, and then she started teaching us. And one of the things what her rules was that I get you material for you to make anything you want. I would always buy you material. I might not buy you an item of clothing, but I would always get you material so you can continue to learn to sew. So through that, from crafts, and as a kid, my sister and I with our mother, we did, you name it, we did it, sewing, macrame, crocheting, knitting, making Christmas ornaments, and so forth and so on. And so as an adult, I always loved the quilts that were made by our grandmothers and so forth. And so eventually I became interested in actually wanting to do it. I should actually say I made my first quilt in high school where you just do the squares, and I put it in and I tied it. And then later on, I wanted to learn more about the quilting techniques, and I took a class, and that's where it started from.
And so I know that there, just in any other art, there are so many different forms and ways of making or creating quilts, and just as a painter has many ways of painting. What's your favorite way of working now that now that you've done it for a long time? Is there one way or one style that you prefer?
Okay, so I also should say in my journey, I've had big gaps. Like when I was raising my kids, I didn't do anything. I started with piecing, which is probably be the direct step from having sewn a lot to do the piecing type quilt. And then now, it's like in everything, once I kind of master it, I want to try something different. So in quilting now, I've been working on, I just never took the time to really look at doing like foundation piecing and trying that. And so I'm working on a quilt where I'm doing foundation piecing. And then the other thing I'm trying to venturing off into is trying to do more of the art style quilting and learning some different techniques to doing the art quilting. I find that very fascinating, using fabric as paint in essence, or something like that to make pictures.
Yeah. What about you, Marsha?
And I'm, excuse me, I'm still in the piecing phase just to master that. but I take these classes and a lot of them are using colors that don't speak to me. And so I've had to venture out to get my own color to make sure that that quilt is saying something to me when I do it. I too would like to, we just took a class on with the textile of adding that dimension to our quilt. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how to do that. So I hope we take more classes.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about the foundation and piecework, kind of give us I'm not a fabric person. I tried to sew one time and my mama put me out the room. So explain to us what you mean by foundation, and then you mentioned another thing that you graduated to, Donna, is the different parts of quilt making. So
Okay.
your basic quilt making.
Well, okay, one of the things in the piecing piece is using a lot of it where you can cut straight lines. So you can use your ruler and your rotary blade to cut straight lines, and you can put those together to create, you can create triangles and many different things. But one of the things that is more challenging to do if you want to do irregular shapes. And so foundation piecing is using, and there are probably people out there who may listen and say, oh, she's doing a poor job explaining, but you can use the paper and you can draw those irregular shapes, and you cut using this paper, and you can put them together to get your more irregular shapes put together, to get, I don't know if to say more interesting, but different types of quilts that you can't necessarily do with just a straight edge and a ruler that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Marsha, you were talking about the type of things that speak to you, that make you want to create something. What items inspire you? Is it the color? Is it the fabric itself?
And fabric, but I like scrappy quilts, and that's where you just get a bunch of scraps and you just sew them any way that you want to. And the larger it gets, the larger you can see exactly how it's coming. But I think the colors really speak to me. I'm not a dull person. Color, and I know I was making a Underground Railroad quilt through a class, and those 30s replica colors just weren't me. And so I had to stop and I have to restart that to depict exactly what I like and what's going to speak to me.
Okay. So Donna, what inspires you when you want to create? Is it the fabric, or is it the color? Is it the shape of something, or
it's
what do you use for your inspiration?
Like Marsh, it's the fabric, but then also you'll go, for me, I will go and you'll see a pattern, you'll see something, say, I like that, or you see a technique or something. And a lot of it is, for me, is a curiosity. I will see things, you'll go through magazine, you'll see things, and it's like, I'm curious how they made that. And so some things I'll go down an avenue and I may not make several things out, but I'm curious enough into the technique to want to understand how this technique is done. And sometimes you'll go through a technique and say, yes, I like that, and I want to do more. And others, it's like one and done. I've been there, I've experienced it, and that's enough for me. I can move on. And so for me, because it's a hobby, it's like Margaret said, I have to like or love what I'm doing, because if I don't, it's kind of like a book. If I can't get into it, it's like, no, I had put it down. You just don't come back to it.
Yeah. You mentioned G's Bend, and I wanted to kind of talk about the history behind that, because it reminded me when I was reading about it years ago, when I was really kind of discovering art and different types of art and that kind of stuff. Faith Ringgold was one of the people that stood out to me, and that you would see, I'm sure there were many other people who were in textile arts, but with her, and then reading the story of G's Bend and the whole way the exhibition came about. Can you elaborate on some of that history of G's Bend?
Well,
either one of you.
G's Bend too, they were quilting for utility quilts for people to use to cover up at night. And from the history that I know, they were just hanging out on the line, all these quilts. And someone was passing through and noticed them and took a very good interest in them. I think this guy paid them $200 for this quilt. But when he took it back to New York, somebody wanted $10,000 for that quilt. And they do all of their quilting by hand. I have not progressed that far. And so it was just interesting that they were taking clothes, and I'm sure our grandmothers, that's what they did. They took old clothes, old sheets, anything that they had to keep us warm at night. But the technique and the color that they did was so different. I don't think people realize that they could make those to actually quilt it with stitches so little, sort of like a machine stitch. Is that what you heard, Donna, or you know?
Yeah, that's pretty much my knowledge of it. Yeah. And so again, when we go back to our grandmother's quilt, those were all made as utility quilts. I mean, that's where, quilting really came from, is taking what you had, old clothes and so forth, to repurpose.
And these ended up in the Smithsonian,
Yes.
with and the women that went to see their artwork, they never considered it art because, like you said, it was utility to them. It was a necessity.
Doing what they needed
It's just
to do.
like it's just like when they discovered the blues and they just went out in the field in the country and picked somebody, McKinley Morganfield, and brought him back to Chicago, and he became a blues legend. So I understand that's the kind of stuff that went on. And so much of our history is people taking it and we don't know the value of it, but they make it valuable,
Right.
for themselves. Yeah. So, Marsha, didn't you take a trip to G's Bend at one time?
I did. On accident, I had been trying to get there for 10 years. My daughter lived in Alabaster at the time, Alabama. Didn't realize G's Bend was 45 minutes from there. And so we accidentally went. And like I say, then I realized that a couple of the kids that went to Xavier University, that was their parents. But, it was nothing that we knew at the time. And these ladies stayed open until we got there just to visit with us. I know there is a G's Bend conference that comes up every year, every now and again. And I've not had an opportunity to go to that, but that would be a dream come true, to actually go to one and actually make blocks or quilts or whatever we can at that time. So.
Yeah. So do you all belong to any organizations or quilting circles, or are you just taking this on your own, or, Donna?
I'm a member of the Minnesota Quilters organization. And in fact, I'm actually one of the co-directors for the operation part of it. And it is a statewide organization. And I think and probably one of our biggest up is there's a lot of work done for quilting for others. And then we put together an annual conference for statewide participation.
Right. I'm wondering if we can see some of the work that you all have done. Is that available? We can show some of their pieces.
I give away everything. So I don't have anything in my home. The quilt you see behind me is actually a quilt my mom did, and she quilted, and they're just called half square triangles. I could say she was one of the ones. So my goal was to make sure that my immediate family had a quilt of mine, because they say, when you get married, the children get the man's name, they go off on their own. But the only thing a lady can do, and I guess men too, is give them that quilt, something she made by hand. And so that's what I've been doing. So, and I'm just in the process of making some blocks for a quilt. So I have nothing to show. Donna, you get some?
I had sent some pictures.
You
Let me
sent some
see if I
photos.
can.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can show you one of the newer things I'm working on that is more
Okay.
on the art type, using a technique from a person by the name of Tammy Browser of trying to take a photo image and making it into
Oh, okay.
a quilt. And it's not, I
Mhm.
haven't done the quilting part, so I have to be very gentle so the pieces don't fall off, but I'll reach
Okay.
over here and grab it.
All right. Thank you.
I don't know how well this is going to show up, but it might, there we go.
Oh, wow.
And this is
Oh,
actually,
wow.
and so this is actually a picture of my youngest daughter.
Oh, okay. I see the image.
Yeah. And so this is some of the area where I'm trying to venture out into doing more picture quilts and just
Right.
trying to work on collage quilting too.
Okay. And, there is an exhibit that is up now at the Art Institute of Chicago with Lisa Butler, who
Yes.
is doing the portrait quilts. They are just fascinating, the work that she's done. And so just to see that evolve into that, it's really artwork. I mean, it's really like a painting, that you're doing now. What I'm saying.
I think one of the things in textile arts of quilting and all the branch that goes into is that you can use it to express yourself in as many ways as in any other type of art form. And you can, as you explore it and you try different techniques and you try different things, there's ways you can learn to figure out ways to combine things and so forth. And so one of the things, as I have continued to move on and try different things, I realize that there are so many different ways out there and so many different techniques, and how you can put things together is kind of like an unending adventure right now of things you can do and paths. And one of the things I have to be careful of is that you don't start sending yourself so many different directions that like they say, shoes, and I got to go down this path for a while before you try to pick up something new and actually.
Right. I know one piece that I was able to see that you sent was a piece with, it seemed like there were like several photographs of people in that. Was that like a family portrait or?
Right. I did that one several years ago, pre-kids. And it was using, there's methods by which you can transfer photographs to cloth. And I used that to create, taking some images, family images, and putting them together to make a quilt. Because there's some things I have in my head about other things I want to do some photo image transfer and make something like that for each one of my kids.
Yeah. And the other one that really stuck out to me was that there's one that's purple, like a purple one, but it looked like stained glass. It was of a flower. Was that yours, or I'm not sure which one it was, but it's like a flower, but it was like a stained glass, that floral piece.
Yep. Yeah. And that is another style of quilting, is making like stained glass type quilting. That is actually there's several patterns out there, things or techniques to do to make to emulate stained glass.
So Marsha, what's the latest one you're working on now? Anything new?
The one that I'm working on, it is by Lori Holt, and she's a big vintage farm girl. And the classes that I'm taking, farm girl wasn't me, the tractor wasn't me, and they actually recreated everything so that I could have the log cabins in it. I'm trying to make the house green. It's the house that we grew up in. And,
okay.
And some quilting that's hanging on the line. And so I'm very happy about that. I belong to we also do, Donna does too, embroidery. And so I belong to the embroidery and quilting group just at a local store. And there's 5 of us that all quilt together. My husband calls us the cult, but that's just through
My husband does too.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, we start at 10 in the morning and we'll go to noon and start back again at 2 and go until 5, pick back up at 7. But it's just so nice because you have somebody to talk to help you in case you get in the jam. Most of us do our own thing, but so that was really good during the pandemic.
Yeah, being an artist is a very isolated thing, very much like solitude. So I'm sure quilting, if you're in a circle of quilters, it's got to be, inspiring, to be working with somebody else and you all can bounce ideas off of each other. Whereas, if you're a painter, you're just in your own head,
Right.
sometimes, and that may not be a good place to be all the time. Yeah. So let me ask you this. I always ask everybody before we end is, what is your favorite tool? Your favorite tool that you create with?
That's a good question.
The one that you can't wait to get your hands on.
I think my favorite tool, this is going to sound strange, is a scan and cut. You can actually draw your patterns and it will actually cut it for you. And so then you can just take that. So that's a little bit of the art and going along, because if you have a circle and you don't have the proper tool, you can actually scan that right in and lay your fabric on there and it will actually cut it out for you.
Is this a machine?
It's a machine, yes. And sort of like a Cricut, but it's a scan and cut. Yeah.
It's a scan and cut. Okay.
So,
all right, Donna, your favorite tool?
That is a very interesting question. In some ways, I will say, I don't know if I really have a favorite tool, but one of the things I find is most handy when I'm doing things and I'm exploring is actually my tablet, just because there's so much out on the internet now that if I have questions about anything and I'm stumped or I'm trying to figure out a better way of doing things, I can do a lot of searching right in the midst of working on a project or figuring out how things to do.
Okay. Yeah, that is a handy tool. Yeah, we forget about the internet. All right, so I really want to thank you both for doing this for me, for joining us today to talk about quilting and textile arts and learning that, this is a creative process, just like a painter, it's, or any other art form. And I know that you will enjoy and continue doing what you're doing. And I didn't have to look outside of my family to talk about textile arts. All right. Any final words?
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, so I'm thinking that in about, I'm going to do this for a year.
Okay.
And at the end of that year, I'm going to write a proposal to have everybody that I've had on the Sunday Artist Talk do hopefully in 2022, we'll be able to do a live show, so hopefully everybody that I interview will do an exhibition of everybody's work. So
nice.
Be prepared.
Here's heads up.
Whatever you're working on, save it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next month.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.